Okay, it is the last Amud Yomi of the year. Good to see so many people here. Okay, welcome. Okay, let's go. So we're going to talk about a little bit obscure type of topic, but an interesting topic, and that is how do we see the juice that is in a fruit? Let's call it a grape or a strawberry. They have juice inside of it. How do we see the juice that's inside of the fruit? Is it that we see the juice as one entity? Right? Do we see the juice as one entity with the fruit? Or do we see it as like there's the pouch, okay, the skin, and then there's juice that's stuck inside? Okay? Now that sounds like a very strange question, but it's going to have halachic ramifications. Again, you have a grape, right? Is the grape and its juice one entity? Or do you say, no, I have a grape over here, and there's juice captured inside? That's the question the Gemara is going to be grappling with. We'll have ramifications for Tumah. It's going to eventually get back to Chametz. Let's see, okay? So says the Gemara, okay? Yasiv Rav Acha bar Rav Avia kamed Rav Chisda. V'yasiv Amar mishmed Rav Yochanan. Anavim shnitmu. Grapes that became tameh. Okay, so you have grapes that were tameh. Dorchan pachos mikabetza. A person's allowed to press less than an egg's volume of them at a time. Okay, so let's say you have grapes that are tummy. So what you do is, the idea is that you have grapes that are tummy. You take the grape and you pour out a little bit at a time. V'yenan kashel nesachim, and then the wine is valid to be used for the Beis Hamikdash, even though the grapes are tummy. But you go ahead, you squeeze the grapes, the juice out of it, and then that juice, then you do it a little bit at a time, okay? So it's never going to be more than a beitza, never more than, the measurement, which is going to be something which is able to cause them to become tameh, okay? And then because of that, the wine is going to be valid. So what does the Martin infers from here? Al Miksavar, Mashkin, Mifkad Pekide. Rav Yochanan, the author of this teaching, clearly holds that the grape juice, right, the juice inside of the grape, is not seen as one entity with the grape. Because if it was one entity with the grape, then it would already be tameh, right? Obviously, it's not one entity with the grape, and therefore what he says, make sure your grape is smaller than a beitza, okay? Because as long as it's smaller than a beitza, it can't be mitameh other things, okay? And typically your grape is smaller than an egg, right? It's going to be small. You squeeze out the grape juice, okay? And then the grape juice that comes out of it is not going to become tameh. It's a new entity at that moment, meaning while it was still stuck inside the grape, it was a separate entity. It wasn't part of the grape, and now it's poured out. It's not, coming into contact with something which is a beitza of which is the grape is tameh, but it's less than a beitza. It's not going to cause the grape juice to become tameh, and so we see from Rav Yochanan that he holds that the grape juice was not part of the same entity before. Rather, it was seen as like juice inside a flask. The grape was seen as its own entity, and the grape juice was stuck inside of it. Make sense? Makes sense, okay? So le'emas kamitame. When does juice become acquired tuma? L'chisachalahu, when the grapes are squeezed, okay? L'chisachalahu leisish urei. But by the time the grapes are squeezed, the grapes are not going to cause the grape juice to become tame because the grapes are going to be smaller than an egg's measure, right? So as long as the grapes themselves don't have the egg's measure, each grape is smaller than an egg. So when you squeeze it, right? So if the grape was the size of an egg, then it could cause the grape juice to become tame when it gets released from the grape. But assuming the grapes are smaller than an egg, so you squeeze out the grape juice, okay? And then what's in contact with it, the grape that is coming out of, but the grape is smaller than an egg, and you have to be an egg size in order to cause other things to become tameh. To become tameh, it can be any size. But to cause tumah, because you have to be the size of an egg, and therefore, as long as you make sure your grape is smaller than an egg, then the grape juice is stuck inside of it as a separate entity. And then when you squeeze it, now the grape juice is a real reality. It's an entity onto its own. It becomes tameh. No, the grape itself is smaller than an egg, and therefore will not become tameh. Okay.
Back then the grapes were much bigger, though.
Sorry. Some were big, could be some were bigger, could be some were small. It's a big discussion, but the point is that we're saying as long as you make sure the grape is not the size of an egg, then you'd be okay. So you just make sure it's smaller. Ihach, he asked the Gemara, wait a second, kabetza nami. So why does he say that it has to be, that it has to be smaller than an egg's volume? It should even be able to be an egg's volume itself, right? Because once you go ahead and you squeeze it, right? Once you squeeze it, if let's say it's exactly the size of an egg and you squeeze it, right? So then how big is it? Smaller than an egg by definition. So why do you say it has to be less than an egg? It can even be equal to an egg. It's not as learned and taught in the Mishnah. We have a Mishnah which says that a person who goes ahead and squeezes olives or grapes, which are exactly the size of an egg, then the juice will not be contaminated. So why over here? Why did you come along? Rav Yochanan say that it has to be less than an egg. It should be able to be the size of an egg, like we just saw in this Mishnah. The Gemara says no. Hasam di'i avad. there in that Mishnah it says, if it happened. If it happened, it's okay. Because, okay, it's okay. But ideally you shouldn't do so. Why? You don't want to be like on the line, because maybe it's going to be a little bit more than an egg, right? I don't know about you, but I'd be very nervous about, I could barely measure when I use a measuring thing. Like, you're going to use like a exact grape and tell you, oh, this is the size of an egg, this is a little bit smaller. It's very difficult. And therefore, we're saying like this. Rav Yochanan says, if it's smaller, you should, if it's smaller than an egg, no problem. You could squeeze it and you can use it. If it's the size of an egg, you shouldn't do it, okay? If you did it and you knew it was the size of an egg, it's okay, because by the time you squeezed it, it got smaller. But you shouldn't really like flirt with that line. It's too tricky. Therefore, use something smaller. Okay, that's the end of Rav Yochanan's teaching. We're going to see a dissenting view. Amr Rav Chisda, Man sayis lach Rav Yochanan Rabbah. Who will listen to you? And Rav Yochanan, your teacher. V'chi tumash behen leichan halcha. Rav Chisda says, where did the tuma that was in those grapes, where did it go? There's tuma in the grapes. Now, by saying those words, what does that imply? He clearly holds, Alma kasavar mashkin mivla bli. He must hold that it's not, the juice is not like a separate entity stuck inside. He holds that it's absorbed into the grape itself. The juice is part of the entity. And therefore, he's saying, what happens to the tumah of the juice? The juice was already tamei. Why was it tamei? Because he holds that when the grape became tamei, the juice became tamei. It's all one entity, right? As soon as the food became tamei, the juice became tamei as well. Okay, Amrlei. Now we push back on Rav Chisda. Amrlei. Don't you hold that the juice of a grape is contained by the fruits? Vatznan. What about the Mishnah we just cited a moment ago? Tamei mace, we're 33b3. Tamei mace shesachat zeisim anavim. A person who is contaminated with corpse tuma, who squeezes olives or grapes, if it's equivalent to the size of an egg, then it's going to be tahar. So if you hold like we do, like Rav Yochanan does, that the juice is seen as like a separate entity, then you understand why it's tahar. Because again, once you squeeze the grape, then the grape is smaller than a beitzah, and the thing that was stuck inside, when it squeezes out, now becomes like a beverage. Okay, it didn't come into contact with something that was tamei. But according to you, says that it was always part of the grape. Why did that Mishnah say that the juice is going to be tahar? No, those grapes were grapes that never became susceptible to tumah. Okay, so what does that mean? We spoke about this before, that there's a concept that in order for something to be able to come tamei, it has to first come into contact with what? With a beverage, with some liquid. So you could harvest grapes, right? Now, if it gets a liquid before it was harvested, whatever, it depends on the circumstance. But the point is that generally speaking, if it got water on it or some liquid on it before it was harvested, then it's not called huchshul l'tumah. It's not susceptible to tumah. So basically, this person harvested the grapes, and then it never came into contact with liquid. And therefore, the reason that Tzmei Mace is able to squeeze it out is because those grapes never were tamei to begin with, right? Because they never had a liquid on them to begin with. She says, La'emas miskashrei, when do they become susceptible to tuma? L'chisachalahu, when the person squeezes them, right? Because what happens when you squeeze them? The grape juice comes out of them. Chisachalahu batzal shura. But once, by the time they're squeezed, then they're too small, and therefore they're not going to generate tuma. Okay? So the Gemara says, and then he proves his point. Dilo taimahachi. For now, he proves his point not from this, right? So again, Rav Chisda is arguing, don't ask me from this Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about a unique case where the item was not susceptible to tuma, but basically he holds that liquids that are trapped in a fruit, in a grape, let's just say, they are seen as part of the same entity. They're part of the same entity, and it's not a separate entity that is now created when it comes out. Right? That's the machlokes between Rav Chisda and Rav Yochanan. And then Rav Chisda now actually goes on the offensive. He says, let me prove my point. If you don't hold like I do, that if you don't hold like I do, that the juice of a grape is absorbed within the fruit, okay? Hadatanya, that was cited in a brisa above, and this was, we had this dialogue in the case of the chametz truma, right? If you recall, we had this discussion about using the chametz truma, and the author of the brisa said, Halamaza doma, what's it like? L'trumas tutin v'anavim shnitzma. It's like berries or strawberries or grapes that became tamei. Okay, remember that line? We had that line yesterday, right? That basically said that, this case of chametz truma is just like a situation where a person has strawberries or grapes that are tamei, she'ein lo ba lo heter achila v'lo heter asaka, that the kohen is not able to consume them, nor is he allowed to burn them. Okay, so what does that mean? In other words, okay, so again, that line said that when there are grapes or strawberries or grapes that are tamei, the kohen can't even burn them. Ask the Gemara, why can't he eat them or burn them? He should be able to consume the fruits. Why? He should be able to squeeze out from the grape or squeeze out from the strawberry a little bit, and be able to drink it. Remember, we started today's discussion with Rav Yochanan saying that if you have tamei grapes, no problem. You're allowed to go ahead and you could squeeze them out, and when the liquid comes out, as long as the grape is smaller than a beitzah, right? As long as it's smaller than an egg, then the liquid that comes out is complete tahar, right? But wait a second. Why did Rav? Fine. And now we have that was the view of Rav Yochanan, because Rav Yochanan held that the liquid that's there does not become tamei when the fruit becomes tamei. It's a separate entity. As long as it's smaller than a beitzah, it's going to be okay. So wait a second. We have a brisa above that said that when a strawberry or a grape becomes tamei, you'll never be able to eat it. Why can't you eat it? Why can't you just squeeze it out, right? So Rav Chisda would say, I'll tell you why you can't eat it, because it's a strawberry or a grape that was hukshur l'tumah, it was already susceptible to tumah, and it came into contact with something tamei, and therefore the whole thing becomes tamei. But according to you, Rav Yochanan, why can't you eat it? Squeeze out a little bit, make sure it's not big enough, and make sure the fruit's not big enough, and then you'll be able to eat it. Why can't you eat it, right? That's the question he's asking. You could just make sure to use a volume of make sure the fruit is less than an egg each time, and then you should be able to squeeze it out. So Rava answers, Gezerah Dilma Asi B'Huli Deita Kala. Excuse me. Okay, so Rava says that the reason, Rava says it could be done. Really, it could be done, and really you could squeeze out a little bit and pull it out. The problem is, the reason that the Bryce over here says you can't do so is because we're concerned that if a person's going to go, we're going to give the Kohen tummy fruits, the Kohen's going to go ahead and start squeezing out a little bit of grape juice, and he said, oh wow, look at this grape. Pop it in his mouth, right? We're afraid if he's going to be dealing with it regularly, you're going to give the Kohen tummy stuff, he's going to eat it. He's saying, technically, you're right. Like Rav Yochanan said above, if I take a grape and I squeeze it out, the juice that comes out of it, as long as the grape is smaller than a beitzah, totally tahar. The problem is, there's a concern that you're going to sit there and give the guy a whole, 2 boxes of grapes, and Jess is going to sit there, and like all he has to do today on Erev Yom Tov is sitting there going, squeezing a little bit, put the grape aside, squeezing a little bit, put the grape aside. He has better things to do. Yeah. So what's it called? So therefore, it's it's just not practical, and the guy's going to end up going ahead and eating it. We don't want that to happen. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says, are we really concerned that the Kohen's going to make this mistake? But Tanya, we learned to the Brisa, the Kohen's allowed to go ahead. If a person gives a Kohen bread or oil of truma that became tamei, the Kohen's allowed to have benefit from it. The Kohen's allowed to go ahead and burn it for firewood, right? If you have a tamei piece of bread, that was truma, you could give it to the Kohen. Not a problem. The Kohen goes ahead and he uses it as firewood, right? He can't eat it, but he can use it as firewood. The same with oil. He can use it to light a candle. Not a problem. So we see that we're not concerned that the Kohen's going to go ahead and eat the tamei stuff. Amarle, Rava said to Abaya, that's not a question. Pas zarek le ben ha'etzim. How do you cause bread to be used as fuel? What do? You put it on a fireplace. That's gross, right? I mean, again, that we're talking about a fire, like you're putting it in like a bonfire, not exactly, back in it, not putting it in a nice little tray. You're putting on to be used as fuel, right? And shemen shel truma rami lebechay mos. And when it comes to oil of truma, the way that you're going to make it into fuel is by putting it in a disgusting vessel. And therefore, over here, whereas over here we're talking about grapes, you're going to be handling them, and therefore there is a concern of the grapes. There is not a concern of the bread and the oil, and that's why the Kohen, yes, if the Kohen has tamei, truma, bread or oil that he's going to use as fuel, those things are going to be put into dirty things or amongst dirty things, and therefore we're not concerned the Kohen's going to go ahead and eat them. But when it comes to grapes and strawberries, and we say, the only way to get the juice out of it is to squeeze it little bit by little bit, we're going to say not to do that because the Kohen might go ahead and eat it. Okay, so the bottom line is, again, we have this machlokas, Rav Yochanan and Rav Chisda, and it comes up in a couple of different places. The question is, how do we see the juice that is inside of the fruit? Is it seen as one entity? That's the view of Rav Chisda. Or do we, in which case, if you matame the outside, you matame the whole thing, as long as the fruit was hukshur, as long as the fruit was susceptible to tumah? Or like Rav Yochanan, he says, no, it's really two separate entities. There is the casing, the fruit, and there's the juice that's inside. And therefore, the juice that's inside will not be able to be considered becoming tamei until we squeeze it out. And then you have to see, is the item large enough to make it be matame other things or not? That is the end of that discussion. Okay, let's go a tiny bit further. Gufa, we learned above malikim epas v'shemen shel truma shenitmeis, that a person's allowed to kindle with a fire the bread or oil of truma that became tamei. Abaye Amar. Mishmei de Chizkiah, Baisa, the name of Chizkiah, Rav Amar Dvei, Rav Yitzchak, Bar Marta, Amar Rav Huna, Lo Shana Lapas. This is only true about bread. Aval Chite Lo, Shema Yavo Vahem Lidei Kala. When it comes to kernels you can't, because a person may go ahead and eat them. And the reason for that is that wheat kernels that get thrown into a fire, you and I may not touch them, but wheat kernels don't get like all charred by the fire the same way that bread does. Bread, you leave it in the fire for a few minutes, it's going to get all black. But the kernels, they're not so susceptible to the flame, and therefore they're not going to get so charred. And therefore he says the kernels you can't handle because you might end up eating them, which you can't do. Okay, and Rav Yochanan says that you are even allowed to put wheat kernels into a fire. Ask the Gemara, Vamai, why would you allow to use wheat kernels? Maybe a person is going to come to transgression because they're not going to burn, and therefore the person is going to go ahead and use them for other things. Rashi says, Bishliksa umisasa. We're talking about kernels that were first boiled, and therefore they're made, and then once they're boiled kernels, it's not bread, but if it's hard kernels, they don't really get charred by the fire. We're talking about kernels that were boiled first, and therefore when they're in the fire, they get a little disgusting. Hachanami bishliksa umisasa. We're talking about boiled kernels that are made disgusting by the fire. Okay, we'll stop over here. I realize we made a bit of a schedule mistake for tomorrow. I'll just get into talking, so whoever's missing it. But in terms of because there's tashlich before the shir, so I think tomorrow's shir we're just going to have probably about 20 minutes before mincha is at 6:40, tashlich is at 6:10, so I need to be there at 6:10. Shul does tashlich together, or some people of the shul do tashlich together. So we'll do the shir at 6:20, like 5 minutes shorter. 6:20. I'll hopefully be there about 6:20, and then 6:20 to 6:40 will be the shir tomorrow. Okay.
Are we gonna do the main
Main shul. Yeah.